Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me in this video. I am so excited. So today I just want to talk about why many teachers are ditching IELTS for ISLPR. As you may realize, these are ISLPR and IELTS are tests that you can use for your teacher registration. You can also use them for your skills assessment. But then when it comes to actual practice and the use of these exams, especially in teacher registration, a lot of teachers are opting for ISLPR. And I'm going to tell you the reason why, because I have done the same. Instead of going for IELTS, I went for ISLPR test. So to start with, think of a situation where you're coming from a foreign country, because obviously it's because you studied in a foreign country that you'll be asked to write these English tests for you to register professionally, but also to have your qualifications or skills assessed in Australia. So you put in a lot of money to come here, you put in a lot of time to study, and finally you graduate. And at that moment, when you have your qualifications, you feel like now it's time to register as a teacher in Australia. You find that there's another hurdle that you need to overcome. And guess what that hurdle is? In most cases, it's the English exam. And mostly it's the IELTS, because the IELTS exam is very popular among immigrants. And it's that reason that it becomes a very big problem or even a hurdle. So all that effort that you put in to complete your education, you need now to start thinking about writing the IELTS test. You put in your time, you put in your effort, and when you walk into your exam, you find that the exam is, after all, not realistic. Your fate depends on the examiner, and if that day the examiner does not come in a good mood, if the examiner doesn't like your accent, if the examiner doesn't like you as a person, then your fate is sealed, and that ceiling might just be failure. So this is why this video is very important, and this video is very, very good for anyone who intends to register as a teacher, or anyone who wants to migrate to Australia as a teacher. Okay, so as a teacher, you might be given an examiner who has not done teaching. They don't understand anything about teaching. That's okay. I don't mind that. But asking you questions that are outside your teaching profession is what becomes a problem with IELTS. So in IELTS, you don't determine what you'll be asked. And there lies the difference. If you write ISLPR, you almost, I am using the word almost because when you are registering for the exam, there will be questions where you are going to teach, whether it's primary or secondary, and what subjects you teach. The questionnaire that is asked to you frames the basis for your exam. I want you to understand this point. When you are applying, or when you are registering to go and write the ISLPR test, there will be a few questions that you will be asked, okay? And those questions will be the basis on which the exam is going to be prepared, tailored to you and for you. Isn't that good? I think for me, that is what I find very interesting about the ISLPR exam, because it's realistic. It's based on what information you give, And here is the catch. If you are asked something outside, like the unrealistic questions that you are asked in IELTS, sometimes even when you are good at English, you find that you may not be able to give reasons or to explain or to express yourself in the way that you should. That becomes a problem. So let me look at the fundamental flaws or the fundamental weaknesses of IELTS. Number one, it's subjective scoring because everything depends on the examiner. Number two, content is irrelevant. It's nothing. Sometimes it may not even be similar to what you know as a person, because when you have been trained, let's say for 4 years in your degree and for 2 years in your master's, or for another 4 years in your PhD, right? You can't tell me that you don't know anything. And you can't also tell me that you can't express yourself, right? But it's because you're asked on a different subject matter, things that you have got no clue about. Those are the things that they ask you about. And if you are asked honestly to comment on that or to express yourself, it might be very difficult. So when you are given irrelevant content to talk about, it becomes a big problem. Why? Because in IELTS, it's all size fits all. But the opposite is also true. In ISLPR, it's very specific to your situation. They'll be asking you questions that relate to you. Another weakness is that the stressful environment that you get, especially if you are doing the computer based IELTS, even the okay, anyway, I can't comment so much on the other where you write on paper, the paper based. I have written the computer based. Yes, there is this timer, there is just this environment which is very stressful because you are racing against you are racing against that time on the computer. The last weakness of IELTS is the fact that the one short deal, one bad day, months lost. You know what that means? You have been studying for all this period of time, okay? And then you just have that moment to prove yourself that you can speak English, you can write in English, you can use English holistically as a teacher, right? Which also means that if you fail that test or you fail in one skill, let's say you fail in reading, it means you have wasted all your time. I don't know, in the past, there wasn't a thing of one skill retake where you fail one skill and you go and just write that one skill. But I think these days, most teacher registration bodies in Australia are accepting one skill retake for certain, but you need to read and check. So it's like you are walking into a trap that is set for you by the examiner. And that is what I find, ladies and gentlemen, to be weaknesses of IELTS. So just to recap on the weaknesses, number one, scoring is very subjective because you don't talk to the examiner. You're asked questions and you respond. And how you respond and the mood of the examiner, everything is more examiner-centered than examinee-centered. So while in ISLPR, it's more examinee centered. It's more about you. It's more about you. Secondly, irrelevant content. They'll give you things that you don't understand. Sometimes you may even be reading about geography when you're a mathematician, or you'll be reading about physics when you're an English teacher. You know what I mean? Irrelevant. Number two, stressful environment. The test itself presents itself, very stressful. If you have done IELTS before, you know what I'm talking about. And then lastly, where you prepare for months to sit on one day and fail and begin another set of months to prepare again to go and rewrite the test. Now, what's the turning point? For many teachers, the turning point is that you have got ISLPR test. I'm recommending this test. Firstly, because I've written this test before. It enabled me to register as a teacher in Australia. That's number one. Number two, you are more likely to do one take and pass and go and register your teacher, go and register yourself professionally in Australia as a teacher. Why? Because, like I've been saying, this is about you. The test asks questions of things that you are familiar with from the information that you give the organization as you register for your test. So that is what is very important for me. When you realize that you're not going anywhere with IELTS, there is a way, there is an open door. Okay, let's now look at why ISLPR test is a game changer. Number one, it's professional focused. Professional focused in the sense that if you are an accountant, they'll ask you questions that relate to accountancy, okay? If you are a teacher, you'll be asked questions that relate to teaching, education, and the teaching environment, okay? So it could be any questions about teaching methods, about education management or school management, but at least it's from within your niche. So it's so much niche based, okay? Number two, it mirrors real life communication because remember, you spend 1 hour talking. Now, if you don't know, in ISLPR exam, speaking is done through speaking to an examiner, and they'll be asking you questions, based on what profession you want to go into or you want to register for, okay? And then listening, you listen to something within, for teachers, for example, you listen to something within education, and listening is so, maybe it takes about 5 minutes or so, yeah, for you to listen. So it's not very long, audios that ask you questions, and you don't have, here is a catch now. Because I have written IELTS, you know what you do in IELTS when you are listening? You're also writing answers, and you are given a few minutes at the end to correct your spellings and just to make sure you have written correct things. In ISLPR test, that's not the case. You listen and you take notes. And when you take notes, the examiner starts asking you questions verbally. You respond, and you can look at your notes. Oh, that's so beautiful. I think for me, that is what I find very interesting. So it's very realistic. And then conversational speaking test. So the speaking test is more like a conversation with an examiner. It doesn't actually feel like an exam. It feels like you're having a real normal conversation with a real person. That's one big thing. That's one big thing. It's a real conversation. Number 4, ISLPR is accepted for teacher registration, okay? You can use it for teacher registration. You can use it for skills assessment. It is recognized by Australian teacher boards and AIT, teacher, like the body that does skills assessment in Australia for teachers. This test is recognized. So you write that one test, you use it for professional registration, you also use it for skills assessment. And yes, that's very important and that's very good, okay? That's why this test is very, very good. Lastly, the only challenge I know about ISLPR test, even in Australia where it was developed, it has got few test centers. And because of that, you have to travel. I live in Alice Springs, and when I wanted to write that test, I had to travel to Melbourne because Melbourne was the nearest. Okay. So that can be expensive because if you know Alice Springs, if you are flying in and out of Alice Springs, you need about $700, $600, $700. If you book your flights very early, you might maybe spend $500. But what about accommodation where you are going? What about food and other stuff? So that's the only challenge I have seen it. And I've seen that it's not given in many other countries. So I don't know how we can go about that. Maybe if we have got more people writing, we may have this test, offered in different centers and centers that may be close to you. So looking at the bigger picture, what should you do? I think teachers really don't feel good enough when they go and write their IELTS test and fail maybe in 1 or 2 skills, which is very bad because that just takes you back. There is an exam that you can write and outrightly pass. Go for ISLPE. And if you are doubting that you may not do well, you can look at my tutorials on my YouTube channel. You may also look at my notes on my website. It's ronaldkaunda.com. You may also want to enroll in my mentorship program that I have prepared for people that want to go into teacher registration or skills assessment in Australia. This test for me is a game changer. And honestly speaking, I feel like you should ditch your plans to write IELTS now, because you know in your heart that when you go for IELTS, it's a gamble. And I know that you are scared because there is a mark, and the mark for teacher registration is very high. I can't remember, but it's about 7.7 and 8 or 7.5, 7.7, 7.5. I don't know which skills, whether it's writing. I think writing, I'm not sure. I can't tell you that information. Just read about it. When you go to any teacher registration board, they'll tell you what level you should get in each skill, and it's very high and it's very scary. But with ISLPR test, you are almost guaranteed to pass. So go and write that test and get your qualifications assessed and become a permanent resident in Australia if that's what you want. And before you leave this video, please don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much. And if you got any questions, just feel free to ask in the comment section, and I should be able to answer those questions. Thank you so much. I will see you again when we talk about something else. Bye-bye.